Should you skip the PS5? How's it going, guys, and welcome to PSReady. In today's video, I thought it'd be fun if I checked in on the PS5 at around 18 months later, aka a year and a half. I did a quick checkup like this with the 1 year later review I did back in November, and honestly, things are pretty good with the PS5, but like any console out there, there's always room for improvement. And before we jump into it, this video is sponsored by me. Down in the description, I have a ton of affiliate links for all of the devices I'm going to talk about in this video, plus a few more. So if you're looking for anything like a controller, a new monitor, some games, any new hardware devices for your PlayStation setup, head down to the description and use those links, and that'll help me build some shelves back there to put some things on so it's not just a brick wall. First of all, I want to talk about the PlayStation 5's hardware, because with Sony, that can always be a hit or miss thing. With the PSP, they made a very durable console. Same thing with the PS1 and PS2, but around the PS3, they started to have some issues. Now, it was nothing as bad as the 3 red rings of death that came to the Xbox 360 and basically ruined that generation for Microsoft, but there was a yellow light of death and a lot of PS3s out there. Basically, if you have any of the fat PS3s, their Blu-ray laser will die at some point, and that is a very expensive fix. I learned the hard way when I was in college. I was playing Uncharted 3. I got to the actual last second of the story, like the very last part of the story, the credits started to roll, and then I closed the game, and the next time I turned it on, the PS3 could not read the disc anymore. So I got really lucky that I beat the story. But yeah, I basically had to make a game time decision, and I put my Xbox 360 on Craigslist and I traded it with someone else for a new PS3. And then with the PS4, every PS4 I had issues just from a raw hardware perspective. The launch PS4 had a really bad glossy texture plastic on it. They actually used the same glossy plastic on the PS5 in the center, that black plastic. It scratched. It was so annoying because I loved keeping my consoles pristine, but if you breathed on that thing the wrong way, it would get major scratches. So I didn't like that. And also, it had a weird issue where the fans sounded like a jet engine. After that, I didn't get a PS4 Slim. I got a PS4 Pro, and my disk drive, which I barely used because I was pretty much a digital gamer during that generation, it broke. And I actually learned this when I got a review copy of Shadow of the Colossus in the mail on disc, and then I couldn't play it because my disk drive broke. So I did some Googling, and I found out that if you put a disc in and then tapped the PS4 Pro above the disc drive, it would actually spin up and start reading the disc. And I used that PS4 Pro all the way up until the PS5 came out. So it basically broke rest mode for me in games like The Last of Us Part 2 and Ghost of Tsushima, because every time I started up the console again, it wouldn't be able to read the disc, and I would have to take it out, put it back in, and then tap the top of the disc drive. So that got really annoying. On the PS5 front though, things are just largely pretty stellar. I use my PS5 a lot. I watch a ton of movies on it. I watch a ton of streaming stuff on it. I play a ton of games on it. Mostly I play Destiny 2, Ghost of Tsushima, Days Gone, God of War. I'm giving another look right now. Horizon Forbidden West has been on my radar. I tried the beginning of it and I was like, I'll come back to this later. But no matter what game I throw at this thing, Returnal included and Deathloop, it works perfectly. It works exactly like it did the day I got it, and it's nice to be back in that realm of Sony hardware because, you know, it sucked for a couple generations when you would buy a new product and it would stop working after a few months. I know you can just send them in under warranty and get them fixed, but I'd rather not have to do that, right? I'd rather just the product I buy work flawlessly, or at least mostly flawlessly, because stuff breaks down over time. And for the most part, almost 2 years in, the PS5 is holding up really well. Of course, the sheer size of the thing is a little irritating just because it's so big. I've talked about this so many times on the channel, but the TV stand I have from IKEA, it's a Fajalbo one that has like a bottom shelf and then a top shelf, and the PS5 fits vertically in there, but you have to take the bottom stand off and you kind of have to slide it across the bottom of the top shelf and it'll like pop into place. So getting it out is going to be a nightmare, but it's sitting there perfectly fine. And I think it's really cool that even though the thing is so big and it's got a weird design, they've given us ways to customize it with faceplates. You can buy multiple different colors at this point, from black all the way down to hot pink, and no matter which one you buy, they all look pretty good with that black strip in the middle. I think from a customization standpoint, Sony could be doing a little bit more. Like, we could get some special edition plates with God of War Ragnarok, or we could have gotten them with Gran Turismo 7 and Horizon Forbidden West. But for the most part, I think the reason we're only seeing color swaps is because they're going to come out with the PS5 Slim and Pro, and those will definitely definitely have a different design that will use different faceplates or no faceplates at all. So they don't want to make so many of these things because they'll become obsolete in just a couple years. And most surprising of all about the hardware, the DualSense has held up extraordinarily well. When I held that thing for the first time, I was like, this thing is really cool, but it is going to break and it is going to be a nightmare having to buy multiple $70 controllers. I, for the first time, am still using the launch controller I got with my launch console over a year later. No matter what it was, the PS3, the PS4, the PS4 Pro, every single one of those, I ended up having to replace the controller after a few months. But the DualSense, even though it has haptic feedback and adaptive triggers that have locks in them and all of this advanced hardware, that thing has been extremely sturdy. And I'm gonna be real, one time when I was bringing my PS5 to work, I accidentally dropped my controller on the cement when I was taking it out of the trunk and nothing happened to it. It didn't even get a scratch on it, which is really cool. So I'm hoping that when this DualSense Pro comes out, it has the same level of quality that we're seeing from both the PS5 and the DualSense, because Sony's absolutely killing it. And if you look at the competition, Microsoft, they have had a few hardware problems with both the Xbox Series X, and I do not even need to get into the Elite Series 2, how many problems that thing has. Like, that was so bad from a quality control standpoint that they had to increase the warranty by another year on everyone's Elite Series 2s because they were being replaced so much. That is unacceptable. I'm glad we don't have that problem with Sony. Now let's talk about the software experience, because honestly, this is something that initially when the PS5 came out, I wasn't super stoked about it, but now that I've used it for a year and a half, I actually really like it, and I like how Sony's improved it. So at launch, the most annoying thing was turning off the console, right? Like, I had that muscle memory from all my PS4 gaming. I would hit the PS button, I think it was go down twice, hit X, go left to hit yes, and turn it off. Like, I could do it with my eyes closed, and they messed that up with the PS5, even though largely it's a very similar OS setup. But they've updated it over time to allow you to rearrange the charms at the bottom of that PS like control center menu that comes up when you hit the PlayStation button. And through that, I've been able to kind of replicate that quick power off sequence I had with the PS4 and PS4 Pro, which is awesome. I also think it's really cool that they separated the games menu and the media menu. So on the PS4, it was still kind of separated, but it was really easy to get everything jumbled together. Having two separate screens that you just go to the top of the screen and select between games and media is super smart, because all of your media apps are laid out. And from a media app selection, the PS5 is pretty good. And as far as feature updates go, that big list of features I wanted to come to the PS5 has slowly had stuff ticked off of it over time, and now there's just a few things left. We got variable refresh rate, which is awesome. On the hardware side, we got the SSD upgrade, which is also awesome. We now have adaptive rate switching. Basically, it'll switch between game mode and movie mode depending on what you're doing automatically, which is really cool. They've also done a good job updating the library section so that you can set it by alphabetical or what's installed on your device or just PS5 games. They've given you a lot of ways to kind of sort things. You can also see the different versions of games much easier now. The two things I think they really need to figure out are 1440p and also save transferring from PS4 games to PS5 games. That is still an issue. They don't have any simple solution. Where on Xbox, all you have to do is download the game, and if you're on a Series X, it'll be like, okay, you're getting the Series X version. If you're on an Xbox One or S, you're getting the S version or the Xbox One version. Super seamless. Your saves transfer totally fine through the cloud. Avengers was a great example of that. On PS5, you got to do all sorts of shit to get that to happen. 1440p support, I've talked about plenty of times on the channel. It's such a no-brainer thing that I don't understand why they don't just update the PS5 to have it. They said the only reason they didn't include it is because they didn't think people wanted it, and even that excuse is absolutely nuts to me, because the most common resolution at this point is 1440p at 144 hertz. Like, that's the monitor that people buy the most because it's the most like cost effective, and 1440p looks a lot better than 1080p. A lot of games that say they're running at 4K on the PS5 are actually upscaled from 1440p. So if the console can render that resolution, but it can't output it, that's bizarre. And also, knowing that this generation is made to have games running at 60 frames per second, but a lot of games we're seeing coming out can't hold an absolutely steady 60 FPS at 4K, they probably could at 1440p, and that resolution just isn't supported. Another area where I think they've simultaneously done a good job while also lacking is with accessories. On the Xbox side, there are so many accessories for that thing. You can get controllers, you can get headsets. You have these options on the PS5, but there's less of them. And I'm assuming that's because with controllers specifically, a lot of third-party developers can't figure out how to get that haptic feedback and adaptive trigger support into their third-party controllers. But still, there's got to be some solution here. The third section of this video is going to be PlayStation Plus, and there's actually some big changes here, obviously, if you've been around over the past few months. So when the PS5 launched, PS Plus was in a pretty decent spot. You got a few games every month, and Sony was largely doing a good job at making sure that at least every other month or so there was one banger included, like God of War or Final Fantasy VII Remake Integrate. And that was kind of annoying because at first you only got the PS4 version, but eventually they gave everyone who got the PS Plus version a free PS5 upgrade. Between the three tiers, I think it's actually set up pretty well with the free games. So like Essential is pretty much what we had before. You get a couple free games every month. Extra gives you even more games, and this month is actually pretty good. We're getting a ton of Assassin's Creed games. Final Fantasy VII Remake Integrate is on there, and of course Stray is a day one exclusive on PS Plus Extra. That's the caliber of game that I feel like is perfect for PS Plus, because it's a game that not as many people as like a AAA game would buy, right? Like it's kind of scary, I bet, putting out an indie game that's gonna cost 30 or 40 bucks, but if you can just get a lump sum of cash from Sony up front to have that game be a PS Plus exclusive, there's no reason not to take that, because people are gonna play your game and also you're gonna make money on the game in the long run, out the gate, which is great. The only one I think still needs work is PS Plus Premium. I think they're doing an okay job, like giving us the PS1 and PSP games and PS2 games a la carte. Some of them aren't available though, and also the big sticking point for me still is no PS3 emulation on the device. I'm not gonna go super deep into this because I've done it a lot over the past few months, but yeah, they need to figure that out. The PS3 generation, in my opinion, is Sony's best generation. I know we got some great games during the PS4 generation, like Uncharted 4, God of War, Infamous Second Son, but 2 out of 3 of those franchises started and had their best games during the PS3 generation. And I feel like it's crazy that we can't experience any of those games natively on the PlayStation 5, because those are games that would really benefit from being upscaled and having their frame rate smoothed out. And the last section of this review is probably my most negative, but it's really not that negative. It's games. So we've actually had some pretty big exclusives come out since the PS5 launched. Of course, at launch, we had Demon's Souls and Spider-Man Miles Morales, which were both really good games. I don't need to tell you that if you've played them. We of course got Returnal, which is criminally underplayed. That might be one of the better PS5 exclusives that people look back on in a few years. It's just that good. We've gotten director's cuts like Ghost of Tsushima and Death Stranding, which are both great upgrades. The Ghost of Tsushima one, I'm a little iffy on, just because they hid a PS5 patch behind a $30 upgrade, and the expansion you get with that $30 upgrade does not feel like a $30 expansion. It feels like a $10 to $20 expansion at most. And when you look back on stuff like Red Dead Redemption Undead Nightmare, that cost $10, and that was like a full game that you got on top of the original. And Sony's charging us $30 for a few hours of content. I know it's high quality and we're in the new generation, but like that rubbed me the wrong way. I'm going out of order here, but Gran Turismo 7 was also a pretty big launch, except it had a lot of issues, which does not bode well for Sony's 10-year live service commitment, because their first live service was nickel and diming people right out of the gate, and they were actually adjusting it to make it more of a slot machine at certain points. And for like the first week that the game was out, the online just straight up didn't work, and the stuff you could do offline was super minimal, and they were charging $70 for that game, so that's pretty much unacceptable. Ironically, the game that I feel like checks the most boxes of quality for Sony is Horizon Forbidden West, and the reason I say that's ironic is because that's probably the one that flew the farthest under the radar at this point. I mean, Demon's Souls, you could say, flew under the radar, Returnal did as well, but Elden Ring came out at the same time as Horizon Forbidden West, and just like with the first Horizon that came out at the same time as Breath of the Wild, when you take a game like Horizon, which is basically like the Ubisoft formula perfected, and compare it to something like Elden Ring or Breath of the Wild, which are like genre-defining open world action games, it's not really a fair comparison. Now, both of those games, from the technical perspective, ran a lot worse than both Horizon games. Horizon was pretty smooth from top to bottom. It had great graphics, great animations, great voice acting. Horizon Forbidden West is the same thing, and that's cool. But yeah, it's not a genre-defining game like Elden Ring is and Breath of the Wild was. Honestly, the most forgettable game for me so far is Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart. From a technical perspective, this game is super interesting. It had the 120 hertz 40 FPS mode that allowed you to take advantage of higher resolutions and ray tracing effects while also keeping a very smooth frame rate. 40 FPS looks amazing because it's the perfect halfway point point between 30 and 60. And I play most of my PC games on Steam Deck that way now because it just looks so good. And also doing stuff with the SSD, like pulling portals to you and jumping into the same world at a different point in time was really cool. I feel like they just marketed that game poorly, where they made it seem like you could do that at any time, but it's actually super rigid. The story was okay. I mean, I liked the characters. Ratchet and Clank are cool. I've played every game in the series. I liked Rivet a lot too. The story just didn't really do much for me because it was pretty standard. The gameplay, it's classic Ratchet and Clank, so it's just more of what we saw in the 2016 remake, which I think overall is better despite the fact it doesn't do as much with the portal stuff and things like that. It just kind of felt like the 2016 reboot with an expansion on top of it. I don't want to be reductive about the game, but that's just kind of how it felt to me because I put a ton of time into that remake and I loved it, and I feel like no one else did at the time. And I feel like just like with Forza Horizon 5, which won a bunch of awards last year despite being pretty much an identical game to Forza Horizon 4, because people didn't play the preceding game, the second one's getting all the praise that the first one should have got. Looking to the future, of course, we have The Last of Us Part 1, we've got God of War Ragnarok, we also have this Last of Us open world game. All three of those to me are absolute bangers. That's exactly what I'm looking for from PlayStation. I'm more excited for that Last of Us multiplayer game than both God of War Ragnarok and The Last of Us Part 1, just because it seems like it's going to be Tarkov Light. We've heard that it's open world. I feel like there's a lot Sony can do there with making The Last of Us a live service game, and we've heard that it's going to come to PC at launch, which is awesome. That's just a rumor, but honestly, if it's a multiplayer game that's going to have free-to-play elements, they have to launch on PC at the same time. They got to get a huge player base right out of the gate, so if people drop off after realizing they're not really into a Last of Us multiplayer game, there's still a community of people there playing the game and keeping it alive. Also, just sticking with The Last of Us and knowing that the show is coming out, I'd love to see a Last of Us Part 3 or a director's cut of Last of Us Part 2 even teased. That would be awesome. Part 1 is kind of like a catch-22 because if you've never gone back and played through some of the combat scenarios in The Last of Us Part 2, it is so awesome. So doing that in The Last of Us Part 1, which I like the story and the environments in that game a little bit better than the second game, I'm excited for that. But this is like the one area where I don't think we really have to worry about Sony. They're doing a good job making their movies and shows kind of tie into game releases. We're getting a Last of Us show to go along with Part 1 in this multiplayer game. We're probably going to get Ghost of Tsushima 2 to go along with that movie. There's a Twisted Metal show with Anthony Mackie coming out. Guarantee you there will be a game coming out alongside that. Of course, we just got the Uncharted movie and it did really well in the box office, so guarantee we'll see a sequel and some sort of Uncharted 5 coming out with that. I like that corporate synergy they've got going on. I feel like they just got to keep doing what they're doing and things will be just fine on the games front. So to wrap this up here, 1.5 years in, I think the PlayStation 5 is in a great spot. The biggest issue with it, of course, is that we can't find them. If you didn't get one at launch, it's very hard to find one still. And we're getting to that point where it might just be smarter to wait for the PS5 Slim and Pro because you're gonna get a cheaper console, probably with more memory, and you'll be able to get a game bundled along with it. Or if you wait even longer, you'll probably be able to get a special edition console alongside it. But that's kind of a minor issue. It shows that people want the PS5. It's selling as fast as Sony can make them. That's good overall for the ecosystem. The only thing they need to make is a Vita 2.